Welcome back, everybody, to what would normally be a Whiskey Wednesday. Today, it's a Tequila Wednesday with Vinny's Beverage Depot. I'm Pat from the Whiskey Hotline, along with Joe and Brett as well. We have very special guests today. We have Jesse Estes from Tequila Ocho, and we have Carlos Camarena from the La Alteña Distillery, who also is responsible for making this delicious liquid. Thank you both so much for joining us. Jesse, it's a pleasure. You want to give us a little background on Ocho and how long you guys have been doing the kind of unique tequila projects you're doing?
Yeah, thanks, Pat, and thanks for having us on. This is fun and probably the best Whiskey Wednesday you guys will ever have, since it's tequila instead of whiskey. I'm just kidding. I love whiskey. So Tequila Ocho, and you'll meet Carlos Camarena shortly, and who's kind of one of the two masterminds behind this brand. It was launched officially in 2008, but Carlos's experience with tequila goes back generations, which he'll tell us about. And my father, who's the other co-founder of Tequila Ocho, his early days with tequila started about 60 years ago when he started drinking tequila, and about 45 years ago when he started working with tequila in Europe. So working with his own bars and restaurants and importing some of the first 100% agave tequila into Europe way back in the 70s and 80s. And this was, born out of fun, I would say, and creativity and passion between Carlos and my dad. And really one of the most unique things about Tequila Ocho is that it is the first single field tequila in the world. So every batch of Tequila Ocho that you buy or find at the store or at a bar will have the year of the harvest and the name of the field from which these agaves were harvested. I think it's 26 different fields, although I might be slightly behind. Carlos can correct me. 26 different fields harvested to date. And the upshot is really understanding a bit more about the influence of terroir and tequila. So the natural elements surrounding these plants, we can see behind both Pat and Brett, actually. The soil composition, the subsoil, the drainage, the orientation towards the sun, the elevation, all of these things will play an influence on the agaves and in turn on the tequila. So it's been a really fun, exciting experiment in a way, that we see these 26 different fields similar, sharing some of the same characteristics, and yet noticeably different from batch to batch because of the terroir.
Very cool. Now, the main lineup has pretty much always had the Plata and the Reposado and Añejo, right? But then you guys have recently had some interesting casks.
Yeah, and Carlos maybe can correct me here, but if I remember correctly, the first ever batch of Tequila Ocho that was produced was called La Ribera, was the name of the field, 2007 harvest. And I don't think any Reposado or Añejo was produced for that batch. It was only a Blanco. And I think the reason for that is that Carlos and my father wanted to create, even besides the single field concept, the main goal with Tequila Ocho was always to highlight and maximize the agave flavor in the flavor profile of the tequila. So it wasn't until the next batch, 2007 El Vergel, which they said, let's make a Reposado and Añejo, but let's play around with the barrel program a bit and the way of aging to keep that balance of agave and wood and not let the wood overpower those agave notes. So that it wasn't until just slightly later that Reposado and Añejo came into play, and extra Añejo as well. And then more recently, like you said, we've played around with very cool cask finishes, aging in different types of barrels, and there's more fun stuff coming out, hopefully at the end of this year and then probably again next year. So we like to push the boundaries, and Carlos and his family have been pushing the boundaries in the tequila world for, generations now.
Yeah. I mean, Carlos, go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, no, what at its core, and maybe we're getting and maybe this is one of the most basic questions, what is the criteria that ends up being used to choose which of the estates or which of the fields you're going to remove from? I'm sure it's a function, at least partially, of what is ready and what is not quite ready. what the volumes are? And then does that lead into a decision about what's used to make the Blanco, what's used to make the Reposado, what's used to make the Añejo, or does that happen after the fact?
Well, after that initial experience of having one field with only Blanco and then El Vergel field to be aged, after that, all of our fields have had at least the three expressions, Blanco, Reposado, and Añejo. So in this case, we don't have to choose which goes for Blanco or which for Reposado, because actually we want to have every expression for every single field. As Jesse was saying, our main goal for Reposado, for Añejo, for Extra Añejo is to preserve the terroir, to preserve the main characteristics of the agave. And therefore, we usually use seasoned barrels that have been aging tequila for years in another brand before we use them in Ocho, because we don't want to cover the agave with oak, just kind of like to use a small frame that we can hang and enjoy by looking at that nice picture of the agave already framed. So that is one part of the question. The second one is when I get this question, how do you choose the agave? I said, well, believe it or not, I never get to choose which agave field are we going to use. Actually, it is a matter, I usually say, the agave field chooses me to be harvested, because I am reviewing all of the different agave fields, and the one that is the most mature, it is the one that will be harvested. So sometimes we are producing Ocho, sometimes at La Teña we are producing other brands, and we don't plan ahead, okay, this field will be for Ocho, this will be for Tapatio or for this other brand. I mean, usually it is, what am I producing right now and which agave field is ready? Or when do we need to start producing Ocho? What is the agave field that is the most mature? And therefore also the size of the fields varies. And that is why some years we have to use two fields, and I think one or two occasions we have had to use up to 3 different fields, because sometimes we come to a larger field, sometimes it's rather small, but this is the one that it is the perfectly mature one. That is the one that will be chosen. But again, it is them telling me when to be harvested more than me deciding which one will go where.
So that's, and you mentioned at least one of the other brands. So for those people who love tequila, they love La Teña because they know that there are a handful of absolutely incredible brands coming out. And I mean, the question get asked, well, what's the difference? And we know that in the case of Ocho, one of the factors is only using agave from one field and identifying it on the label. But there are other, there's another piece of artistry that's involved, which happens when it goes into the production process. And how do you, Carlos, go about when you produce Ocho? You use a different process than what you do when you make Tapatio, when you make El Tesoro, when you make Villalobos. So what do you, what techniques do you use to even more enhance the character of the agave?
Yes, as you were mentioning, each brand will have its own process. And for Tapatio, Tesoro, Villalobos, we actually use agave coming from different fields in the same run of production in order to be trying to be a little bit more consistent from the moment that we are blending the agaves, if I may say it that way. And then also, according to the characteristics of the agave by its own, we have to make little adjustments to fine-tune the process inside the distillery in order to reach consistency, which is what you are thinking of when you think of those brands. When it's about Ocho, and let me tell you, the name Ocho is because first, together with Tom, we wanted to see which method is the one that would transmit the, I would say, the cleanest agave flavor. And we ended up producing tequila in about a dozen different ways. And then we had a blind tasting, and then we both agreed that the one that we like the most, the one that would express more what the agave is all about, it was the sample number 8. Thus, or therefore, the name Ocho. Ocho means 8. And therefore, it was the sample number 8. It was the Ocho, and that is why the name. So in this case, we decided one process no fine tuning, no changing every time that we receive agave from a different field. It is one set process for Ocho, which is cooking the agave in traditional ovens, then squeezing the juice with the roller mill, then fermentation, natural fermentation in wooden vats, but without pulp or fibers from the agave. And finally, double distillation. First distillation is done in stainless steel, and second distillation is in tiny copper pot stills. So that is the process for Ocho. And then what makes the difference between one field and another, it is its origin. It is the terroir, the microclimate, the conditions of fertility of the soil, the time of the year that we are making the harvesting, because again, that is another variable. So those little details at the end get together in order to, I would say, to give personality to what Ocho is all about, because we try not to manipulate the process, but actually try to touch the process as less as possible to allow the agave to express itself.
Yeah, perfect. Because I've had the opportunity to visit, and it is, you see a lot of different facilities all over, but the amount of ways, it's just amazing. If you ever get a chance to go, I'll tell you the number of different ways you can process the agave all the way through, from when it comes out of the field to how it is milled, to how it is fermented, to how it is distilled, and the combinations are limitless. So it's just the fact that you can come up with 12 different processes says something about the complexity of what you're doing.
And,
Can you break down? Go ahead, Carlos. Sorry.
And also by thinking that this is a very traditional distillery. So we are not even talking about technology here. Then if you are adding technology and modern process, then as you were saying, the variations are limitless, because you can do whatever you want. This is all made by hand. This is a traditional process, and still being very traditional and everything done by hand, you can still produce tequila 12 different ways on our humble distillery.
So I was going to ask more about the process as it specifically applies to Ocho, as far as the agave cooking and crushing and fermentation goes. What methods are used for all of those?
Okay, as I was saying, for cooking, we use traditional ovens. So it is a slow cooking of the agave with steam, never a direct fire. So if eventually you detect a little smokiness in the tequila, well, it is not because we use real smoke or real fire on it. It is part of what the agave will impart into tequila. So that smokiness comes from the agave, not from a fire. It is a traditional cooking process. It takes up to 72 hours to cook the agave, very slowly converting the starch of the agave into sugar that we can ferment and eventually distill, but without the risk of caramelizing that sugar. That it is something that you may find if you use modern technology. You want to do everything so fast. I mean, cooking the agave on a modern facility takes 7 hours. For us, it takes 72 hours. So that is the first step. The second one is, I was mentioning the roller mill, which is a piece of machinery that it is squeezing the agave, then we add water and squeeze again, and then again 5 times in order to squeeze the agave, but without an external influence. For our other brands, we use the Tahona, which is a round pit made of stone with a stone wheel on top, crushing the agave, but that stone will also release some minerals. And therefore those tequilas are adding some minerality, but it's a minerality that was, let's say, added because of the process. So we wanted to keep it very clean, and we decided to use the roller mill, which is adding nothing to the process. Fermentation, it is open fermentation in wooden vats, 5,000 liter capacity, so smaller for a distillery's capacity, I would say. And for Tapatio and for El Tesoro, we ferment using the fibers and the pulp of the agave. For Ocho, we use only the liquid of the agave. It is fermented. It is a natural fermentation. It is wild yeast that it is floating at the distillery and also impregnated in our wooden vats. So we do not add any commercial yeast. Again, if you start adding different types of yeast, you can have a lot of different variations, and therefore the opportunities are endless. In our case, since my grandfather built this distillery 84 years ago to be precise, we have always used native yeast that it is, again, impregnated in our distillery, and never a single commercial yeast. So natural fermentation. Finally, for distillation, first one, it is made in stainless steel. As you know, stainless steel is adding nothing and removing nothing. The second one, and the fine tune of the final spirit, it is made in very small copper pot stills. Why copper and not stainless steel? Well, because the copper interacts with the alcohol fumes, and it will remove sulfates. Any sulfurous element that was formed during fermentation will be removed by the copper, and therefore you get a cleaner spirit. And that is our process. We distill to 110 proof average, and that is how we also age our tequilas. So if they will be in the market at 80 proof, we dilute those with water that comes from a natural spring, also here at La Alteña Distillery, and that will add also a little bit minerality, but those are the minerals of the water, which is coming from the ground right here. And if it's a single barrel tequila, then it will come as it was aged in the barrel, usually 53 to 55% alcohol by volume. That's the process.
Agave at the office here makes a great point that native yeast is absolutely key for a true expression of terroir. And actually, in that context, it is kind of triple terroir with Tequila Ocho. It's the agaves themselves in the fields from which they were harvested, and the yeast, of course, is indigenous to that area, and the water as well. So it is very much terroir driven.
And I think the part of that terroir is also the fact that, Carlos, you brought up the fact that La Alteña is now 85 years old. And so there are a number of generations involved, just like in Ocho, there are multiple generations. There are multiple generations of Camarenas involved, and even the people that work for you in the distillery, right, are multiple generations.
Yes, I am fifth generation agave grower and tequila producer. And at La Alteña, we have people that is third and even fourth generation working with us, mostly in the same positions. I mean, as a little example, the 4 distillers that we have on a regular basis, all of them are brothers. And they learn the art of distillation from their father and their uncles, who were distilling also with my father. And their grandfather was the main distiller with my grandfather. So it comes from generation to generation, because it is not just knowledge, it is art, what they are learning from previous generations.
Yeah, which is absolutely critical. I mean, there are people, you kind of have to, for folks, if you happen to find yourself in Arandas, then maybe you can look up Carlos and visit the distillery.
Yes, please do. We are looking forward receiving as many people as possible now that the pandemic finally is getting a little, I wouldn't say it's over, but at least we are getting more and more chances to travel with safetiness, but it's still, and please come, because it is not the same to hear me talking about it, that to come, smell, touch, feel, and finally taste this magic liquid coming out of the still, and you will understand why we are so in love with tequila.
So, and Carlos, and things were you able to maintain, and I know that you have a lot of space, were you able to produce pretty easily throughout the worst of the pandemic? I don't remember reading how badly Arandas was affected compared to other parts of Mexico, but were you able to produce during the whole time?
Yes, fortunately, we didn't have a single case with our workers. We had only one case on office, and we took care of this person. Fortunately, it was not very bad, but nobody else got infected at La Alteña. And as we are considered essential business, which I agree, I mean, tequila is essential in my life and in a lot of people's lives. So being an essential business and having the fortune of being not in a city, not in a town, but actually out in the fields, in the middle of nowhere, not a lot of chances for that virus to get here. and therefore we were able to keep on producing, and we were fortunately not affected by the pandemic.
Yeah, that's good.
Looks like there's another question here, Agave at the office. Let's see. We experiment with a lot of variables. All the single fields are now treated exactly the same to highlight only terroir. So one of the things we haven't mentioned is that not only are we single field, but we're single estate. So that means that Carlos and his family are in a very unique position with a small handful of other tequila producers in Mexico, that they own all of the agaves that are used in production for I think all of their brands. So they're what we call a grower producer. And what that means is that there's a huge amount of control over the raw material, over the agaves themselves. So no chemical pesticides, no chemical herbicides or chemical fertilizers are ever used in the soil or on the plants. And again, you know, a lot of these fields have been in Carlos's family for generations. So we know that going back 40, 50 plus years, this soil is in really good condition. There's crop rotation and just very well cared for, all the fields. So we're very lucky in that sense that we're starting with the best quality raw material to produce the best quality, we think, tequila possible. And like we were saying, the production process that Carlos described stays pretty much exactly the same. Of course, you know, water may change over months or years, and the yeast and airborne yeast may change naturally over time, but basically the production process stays exactly the same. So we are, as much as possible, isolating that element, that variable of terroir, to let that show itself off in the tequila however it does in each batch.
Have you ever seen any kind of variables with sugar content or fermentation time between fields, or is it still, you know, you're still using these Highland agaves that are probably, I'm guessing, you know, 7, 8 years old? And is it a fairly consistent, you know, predictable result for you as a distiller on the fermentation side?
Not really, because again, each field will have its own particular fertility, and some fields are flat, some are rocky. In rocky fields, I would say hillside, usually the agave takes longer to grow and mature. The size tends to be smaller, but usually because of that stress, will have more sugar content. The more that the agave is stressed, the higher the sugar content. And then we were making some tests also using some of the liquid residues of the distillery, which we call vinazas, to slightly irrigate some agave fields, because those vinazas are full of organic elements. And we wanted to see how that would affect the agave. And to our surprise, we were able to harvest agaves that were up to 42% sugar content.
Wow.
For us, controlling our own agaves, I would say our average is about 30%, 30 to 32, 33% sugar content. And to give all of our viewers an idea, the average sugar content of agave that the whole tequila industry is using right now, it is 23. So for us, whenever an agave truckload comes to La Alteña and it is only 28 or 29, my chemist will tell me, oh, this agave is too low in sugar. So, well, most of the industry would kill to get that kind of agaves, but for our standard, that is a little bit low. I am an agronomist, and therefore, besides knowing the plant and caring for the plant, to me, what comes most importantly, it is our only, agave is our only raw material to produce tequila. If you have a first quality agave, then you have a chance to produce first quality tequila. If your process is not right, you can still destroy that chance, but at least you have a chance. If you depend on the open market and you face yourself with a shortage of agave, which right now is happening, we have 3 years with a severe shortage of agave. If you don't have your own, you have to buy what? Whatever is available in the market. You may end up buying second quality or even third quality agave. And the question is, with the second quality agave, can you really produce first quality tequila? The answer is no, regardless if your process is perfect. You start with the second quality raw material, your product is second quality. So to us, that is the importance of the agave and maintaining our fields in the best possible conditions and keep on treating all of our fields the best as we can, because as I was saying, I am fifth generation using these fields for the same purpose, and it doesn't end up with me. I hope that it will be at least another 5 generations behind me using those fields, and therefore my role is to keep them in good condition. I am not really the owner of the fields, even if the paper says so. I consider myself the guardian of the fields, because someday I will depart this world and the fields will remain for my family, for my kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids to be used. They better be in good shape.
That's an awesome responsibility to hold. It really is. What so we had a question about bats here actually, and I know that's been kind of a growing thing with a lot of tequila producers we've talked to, and there's a growing concern about this monoculture we've kind of collectively created with Weber Blue Agaves. Can you speak to anything on that matter?
Well, yes, I would say that fortunately we were invited when it was only an idea to have this project that we call the Bat Friendly Project. We were invited by Dr. Rodrigo Medellin from the National University of Mexico and David Suro from the Tequila Interchange Project. And when Dr. Medellin came to explain what the idea was, he said, well, you know, with 100 or 120 years that you have been using only the little pops, the hijuelos, little plants that grows next to the mother, which by the way are clones from the mother. As a result of this, the blue agave has almost lost all of its genetic diversity. All of the agaves have the same genetics. And besides that, being a monoculture, you harvest the agave and then you plant agave again, and then you do the same. I mean, you never leave your soil to record, but also the agave it is all of the blue agave in Mexico basically comes out of 2 clones or 2 genetically different plants that are twins. So almost no variation. The main problem that we were foreseeing for the future was if eventually we get a big disease, a pandemic of the agave, a virus, a bacteria, a fungus that attacks the agave, it could wipe out all of the blue agave in Mexico, and therefore it would be no more tequila for us to enjoy and drink. So the challenge, it was to allow the small percentage of agaves reaching full maturity to actually reproduce by seed, not only by pops or these little clones, but actually to be pollinated and to produce seeds. As the agave is a type of succulent, during the day, the agave is dormant. It's not breathing, it's not transpiring, it's not feeding, it's doing nothing. All of its living functions happens at night. So it is the same when it's flowering. During the day, the flowers are closed down. At night, the flower opens up, and in between 10 o'clock at night and midnight, our time, it produces 90% of all of its nectar. So at that time in the night, who is there to collect the nectar and to bring different pollen from different plants? It is the bats. So we kind of made a deal with the bats saying, okay, we will feed you, and in exchange of that, please bring some pollen from different species of agave that are growing widely in the area, so we can have the chance of a small genetic diversity in the resulting plants that will come from seed. And eventually we can bring back some natural resistance to the attack of viruses and bacteria. Because the question is not if someday a virus, a bacteria, a fungus will attack the agave. The question is when. It could be tomorrow, it could be in 10 years, it could be in 200 years. You never know. You never know with this. Now with the experience we're having, we know that you never know when this virus, this bacteria, this microorganism will attack. So we better try to be as much prepared as possible. And that's what we are doing with the Bat Friendly Project.
Have the bats cooperated so far? Have you seen some growing genetic diversity?
Yes. Actually, some results that we were hoping that we would get in 7 or 8 generations of agaves, meaning 70 or 80 years. In the first generation, now we are finding agaves that are slightly different to the view, to the eye. So, but if they are slightly different to the eye, it means that there's some genetic variation there. We hope that some part of that genetic variation is natural resistance.
Yeah, and the other cost that I think to people understand, because you've talked about the sugar levels in which your minimum sugar level at which you'll accept agave, that is driven primarily by age, correct? I mean, you have to have agave of a certain age, and the risk you run when a plant goes to seed, that plant then kind of becomes unusable to make tequila from. So if you're talking about having a shortage of plants, I mean, that's the risk. You have to give up some material to allow these plants to shoot the quiote, right? And then have the ability to reproduce in that manner. And I think that people don't understand that as everybody's rushing to market, the second there's any kind of sugar that can be used, people rip it out of the ground and use what little sugar is there just to get volume tequila. And you have to put your stocks, you have to affect your stocks at least a little bit to keep this project going. Is that right?
That is correct. That is correct. Again, all of its life, the agave, what it's doing is accumulating energy. In this case, sugar content. The younger it is, the less it has. Usually also in the last year of living, when the agave is reaching full maturity, is when the agave starts concentrating more and more and more sugar inside the piña for one single purpose: reproduce. To sprout the quiote, to produce flowers, to produce seeds. In that process, all of the sugar gets consumed. So it was reserving energy all of its life to consume in that event. If we allow this to happen, of course, we have no more sugar to produce tequila. That is why it is only a small percentage of plants, the ones that we are allowing to do this, because we need some plants without that process so we can still produce tequila. But the younger the plant it is, the less sugar it has, because it is only when it's reaching maturity, when the plant is really producing all of this energy to be able to reproduce sexually through flowers and seeds.
Yeah. So, and what age is that?
It could be somewhere between 6 to 8 years. Okay. Because even if we are talking about the same genetics, agave plants that are planted the same day in the same field, in the same row, 3 or 4 feet away, one from the other, and then you see that they do not reach maturity at the same time, all of them. Why is that? Because again, the particular conditions of the little piece of soil where they are sitting at, which is the minerals, which is the nutrients that they can get from that little plot of land, and that will make them express differently. So not even all of the agave will mature at the same time. For us, it can take 2 or 3 different harvests, 2 or 3 different years to finish harvesting out of a field. Usually at the 6th year of life of an agave plant, probably about 10–15% of the plants will reach maturity. You collect only those. The rest are not yet mature. The next year, the 7th year, probably you will have about 70% of the agave plants reaching maturity. And the 8th year, you will have the lazy ones, the ones that took the longer, and it is the final cut of the agaves, which again, that's another difference. Usually a modern distillery, once the agave is reaching maturity, they will come and harvest all of the field at once. Again, another reason why the average sugar content for the industry is lower. In our case, we only harvest the ones that are fully mature, and then the rest will remain there, and we will come back 9 months or 1 year later to harvest another part, and then 9 months to 1 year later to harvest the final cut. After that, we allowed our fields to have a crop rotation 2 to 3 years with corn and beans. In those 2 to 3 years, we are adding a lot of compost and manure in order to give back the fertility to the soil before planting agave again. So in our case, it is not a monoculture, and we are not in such a hurry. And that is why also our process is very traditional, and it takes longer. For us, from the moment we receive the agave into the distillery to the moment we are already distilling tequila takes 2 weeks. For a modern distillery, it takes a week. So some people from modern distilleries have told me, oh, you are so inefficient. You are wasting so much time because, hey, For me, it takes only 7 days. You are taking double the time, double the cost, double the effort. I said, yeah, you're absolutely right. We are very inefficient. But also, there's another difference. You are buying agave in the open market. You care from the moment that the agave gets into your place. In our case, I planted that agave. I already waited 6, 7, 8 years for that agave to have its best expression. And after waiting that long, should I hurry up things inside the distillery to save a week? It doesn't make any sense. If you want to do things right in tequila, you have to learn to be very patient. It takes years of work to get a well done product. And that is what we try to do with Ocho and in every single aspect of our life. In the fields, with the agaves, with the tequila, with everything is do it right from the beginning. It will take longer. I don't care. We're not in such a hurry. So why not?
Yeah, that's something really special and unique, I think, within the industry that, you know, the jimadores that work with Tequila Ocho will go through and hand pick only the ripest. So even though Ocho is single field, we're not whole field. We don't go in and just say, yep, there's, you know, 1,000 plants in here. We're going to harvest them all. No, it's, you know, it may only be 50% or 60% or whatever those specific fields, those specific plants, however many are ready. So it's very unique as far as I'm aware within the whole industry.
Yeah, very much so. So what we've got, the specific, we are, I believe, it's gone through multiple generations. We are currently on our shelves at Binny's, at least. We have the 2020 harvest La Loma. So Jesse, what can you tell us about this particular distillation bottling?
Well, the fun thing, you know, about our labels is that there is, you know, there's quite a bit of information on the back. So there's actually the size of the field, in this case, 25 acres, sloping gently from east to west in a north-south direction, 2,085 meters above sea level. So this is pretty typical in terms of the highland. Their highest field, which I think you have there as well, that we mentioned, called Cerro Grande, was just shy of 2,300 meters, if I remember correctly. So, but this is high up. I mean, what is that in feet? It's
over 6,000 feet. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is high up. You know, you can ski or snowboard at that altitude in Colorado, or I don't know where the ski resorts are near Chicago.
Nowhere. If you can't ski anywhere near Chicago, you shouldn't even try. There's a hill in Michigan somewhere, I'm told.
Right.
Carlos, I got a question. I was told the last time I was around this area, I was told by a representative from another distillery that the red soil of the highlands is kind of natively not a great healthy environment for agaves, and that agaves weren't exactly native to the area. And that's why when highland agaves grow, they tend to grow sweeter because they're working harder and producing more sugar and concentrating more sugar. Was I fed a load of crap, or is that true?
No, actually, but I would say the variable is not the soil. The soil is full of minerals, is full of iron. That is why the red color, because it is iron rust. And it is full of potassium, and those two are preformers of sugar molecules in the plant. The agave grows slower and usually has more sugar content because of the altitude. We have cold winters and we have drier summers than what they would have in the Valley of Tequila, and therefore the plant is usually more stressed out. The more stressed the plant, the more sugar it will make. So it comes winter and it is very cold. The plant is trying to survive. What it makes the plant? Tries to produce more energy to protect itself. And it takes longer because of those cold conditions. The plant in winter kind of, again, stops any process. It shuts down, it's not growing, it's not doing anything, all until better times. In Tequila Valley, the winters are milder, and therefore the plant keeps on growing, and therefore the plant will reach maturity faster there because it doesn't have these dormant periods that we have in the highlands. So it takes longer to grow and mature, but also because of the conditions, both the soil providing these nutrients or these elements that will help the plant to form sugar molecules, and the stress will create more sugar content in the plants of the highland of Jalisco. But also interesting, there was a study made by the CRT determining which was the best possible area to grow agave in all of Jalisco according to its conditions, soil, microclimate, all of this. And they ended up determining something that we usually call the golden triangle of agave. And that golden triangle of agave is in the highlands of Jalisco, and it is in between the towns of Atotonilco, Arandas, and Jesus Maria. Our distillery and most of my fields are exactly in the center of that golden triangle. So this is the best possible conditions to grow quality agaves. Takes longer? Yes. You need to be patient. You want better agaves? Hey, it will take you 1 more year than in the valley. Who cares about 1 more year? But we want and we have better agaves.
Yeah.
What and then the other thing. So your great grandfather or your great great grandfather, would they have? When did blue agave become predominant in the region? Because it wasn't, right? What other agave species might have grown 80 years ago besides blue?
There was about 7 species that actually were allowed to use to produce tequila up to the 1940s. In the 1940s, it came the first norma or the first law that said that all the agave we had to use for producing tequila was the blue agave Tequilana Weber. And the reason to choose that, it was because it was the one that would grow the fastest and the one that would have the more sugar content. But also we were using other ones that, common names. It was the Bermejo, the Saguayo, Pata de Mula, Chino. So there were about 7 different species. And also, if you think agave Tequilana Weber blue variety, why so specific? It means that there's other varieties of agave Tequilana Weber. Yes, according to Weber, there's another one, which is the agave Tequilana Weber white variety. And according to another biologist who classified the plant, it was agave pseudo Tequilana trellis. Put that name. So it was Tequilana Blanco or Pseudo Tequilana. And it is still growing in this area. I mean, again, we cannot use it for tequila, but those are excellent sources of genetic material because they are very related to the blue agave. It is not blue, but they are related, they are compatible, but they have different genetics that we want to bring in using the bats in order to have this natural resistance. So the plant won't look completely different. It is slightly different because of that cross-pollination, but to us, that is a good sign.
Would anybody in the area, because I know there's raicilla, especially if you go like towards Tequila and more towards Puerto Vallarta, there's in those hills, there's a lot of raicilla produced from Cenizo and different plants. Is anybody producing any, either what they would call raicilla or just other destilado, agave destilado, which doesn't specify from those other variants of Tequilana? Is anybody making anything with those?
It was nobody until very recently. I mean, everybody was focused on tequila, and actually a tequila company decided that the CRT rules were very strict, and they wanted to keep or to have the chance to experiment with these other traditional agave species that we were able to use again at the beginning of the century. So now Caballito Herrero decided to leave the CRT, and it is not tequila anymore, but they are producing distilled spirits from blue agave Tequilana Weber. So even if they cannot put the name tequila, well, that's what it is. But also by making that movement, now they are able to produce some agave spirits using some of those other traditional agaves that grow in the area and that by law now we are not able to use. Sometimes I say, hey, yes, I wish I could do that too. I am afraid to leave the CRT, denomination of origin tequila, all of this. But I see what they're doing and I start salivating and saying, oh, I want to try some of those. Unfortunately, by law, I can't, because the law says that if you distill tequila on a distillery, you cannot distill anything else, anything.
So you can't experiment. That was my next thing. You can't experiment. Yeah.
No.
Damn. Can you build a little still? Can you take one of your stills
site
and like put a little shed on the side of the
Yeah, that's what you
distillery?
think. Build a little garage in the back and put a new still in it.
Actually, I'm thinking on building a little room next to the distillery, not officially part of the distillery, but so I can take some pipes with steam from the same boilers of the distillery, but officially will be out there and make a little experiment. Because as I love all of the agave plants, I can tell you personally, I have a collection of different species of agave, and I see them grow, mature, throw the quiote out, produce flowers, produce seeds. And sometimes hey, can I keep one of those just to see what happens? Maybe I can even cook them, even if it's on a pizza oven. I don't care. I want to see what this agave has to bring to the table. And I could use them at the distillery. So maybe a little bit separated from the distillery, not officially part of it, but maybe the source of energy might go through a pipe.
Well, there you go. Well, there, then you can sell it. You can either have, Jesse can bring it in and make it an Ocho line extension, or I'm sure David Suro would be happy to take whatever you had and put it in bottles and get it to us.
Yeah, we could sell it.
Yeah, I will keep thinking about it.
Salad
So-
will
That's good.
bring you some samples. Those are always the most fun bottles, are the ones that are no label, no price tag, just something cool to taste.
Yeah.
Here, try. What is it? It's good. Just try it.
Speaking of cool to taste, though, I've been going back to this Ocho Reposado over and over again, and it really is striking how clean and fresh it is for a Reposado. And I know the intent is to let the agave speak, and I know this going into it, and it still surprises me just how fresh and agave forward it is. But it's got a little bit of that spice on the finish. It's just, this is a wonderful tequila, and I love how it just transports you to agaves being roasted. For me, it's really, really amazing stuff. I'm glad that we have the opportunity to sell it and carry it.
A well-made reposado, instead of covering the agave, should enhance the agave, because the sweetness of the cooked agave combined with a little bit sweetness from the oak, a little bit of that vanilla caramel elements from the oak, enhances the agave flavor instead of covering. And that is kind of the art of aging. Also, it's not just being determined by a certain amount of time. My Lord Reposado could be 2 months, but also is, to me, the right moment of pulling a Reposado out of the barrel is when it has reached the perfect balance, because this is about balance. Balance the agave flavors, the agave notes, with a little bit of notes coming from the oak. When this balance is achieved, then you should take it out of the barrel and then sell it. It might be 2 months, it might be 6, it might be 11, depends on every distillery and depends on what you are looking for. But the main part is it has to be very well balanced in order to be really appreciated by the consumer.
And that is an approach you take. So you pick, and you do that with all the Ochos. I would assume you do that with all the Ocho products. You guys pick, you take specifically, okay, we know this is going to be Ocho at some time, but you don't necessarily plan for whether it's going to be Reposado or Añejo. It's like, okay, this is really good now, it's going to be Reposado. Or let's see what happens, let's see what happens. And then after a year, well, I guess now it's going to be Añejo.
Yes. And then we are tasting from each individual barrel to see how they are developing. And if we find some that are outstanding, different from the others, that they deserve a place by their own, that is when we get the Ocho single barrel añejos or single barrel extra añejos. When we find a barrel saying, oh, this is usually better than the rest, or it is different, it has a certain notes on aromas and flavors that we don't usually have. So this deserves to be on its own feet. And then we separate that barrel to become a single barrel expression.
Which we have done before. In fact, I believe once at an Independent Spirits Festival, you helped us sell us. It was the easiest day that Joe and I had ever at a booth, because we were behind a booth and everybody said, well, what makes that Ocho so special? And we just pointed at you, we're right beside us. We pointed, it's like, ask him, he made it.
It was also the first time that I met Mr. Camarena, because he first acted like he wasn't who he is, and was asking about the specifics of the field where the agaves had been grown. And when I gave him a taste, he said, this is probably the best tequila I've ever had. How did my name get on this bottle? That was really really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are just absolutely gorgeous, and it's everything that you make for people who haven't had an opportunity to try Ocho. We're blessed to have a good tequila on the shelf, but this is one of the truest expressions you can possibly get. I mean, this is truly the expression of the plant.
What are we, what's our pricing on these currently, Brett?
We should be 50,
55, I think, on the repo.
yeah, we're 50 on the Plata, 55 on the Reposado, and 65 on the Añejo. And then as they come in, when we had the transatlantic and the tropical and the continental, which were just the different wood experiments, those were $80. So look, there are a lot of things on the shelf that are much, much, much lower quality for much, much, much more money.
Yeah.
That don't really tell the tale of the land as much as these do.
What's next with the experimental stuff, Jesse?
That I can talk about right now, probably not too much. Ask me again in maybe 3 months, and I'll have a little bit more information for you. But there are 2 products this year that one is very fun, just very tasty liquid, which is not the most groundbreaking product in the world, but the other one is something really unique and different that has never been done before, ever in tequila, at least to my knowledge, Carlos.
Not that I know, and just to get you all jealous, that is the one that I am enjoying right now. This is something else. But very soon we can disclose this. I mean, not yet, because we don't want another of those very commercial distilleries to
Yep.
take notice and try to say, oh, we were the first to do this, even if it is not true. But we want to make sure that, hey, till the last moment, then we will pull the rabbit out of the hat and we will show it to the public. Right now they are telling, what do you have in your hat? Make a guess. It might be a rabbit, but also it might be a pigeon. So I will show it.
Rabbit or pigeon, our new favorite game.
That's fantastic.
I guess we had one other question on the agave. Is there a potential for cross-species pollination, or are they also closely related subspecies that it still is considered blue agave?
That is a good question. And actually, 2 weeks ago, I had here Dr. Gary Graham, which is a biologist from the University of Arizona. And he's a specialist on agaves. And I was showing him some of the agaves actually born from blue agave seed that were looking different. I said, this is a hybridation. This is a product of cross-pollination. So the question is, if it's born from a blue agave seed, can we call it blue agave? The answer should be yes. We are having some kind of well, not hybridation, or maybe a little bit hybridation because of the cross-pollination. But if it's born from an agave seed, a blue agave seed, strictly speaking, it should be considered a blue agave plant.
There's a picture of Gary taking a nap in front of one of your stills.
Yes. There you go. Hey, you are prepared with everything. I didn't know about that picture.
I don't think Gary knows about that picture either.
First time I've seen it. Yes. First time I've seen that picture.
Well, Carlos, thank you so much for joining us. And Jesse, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure, and it's always a privilege to talk about tequila with the masters. I mean, these tequilas are great, and who are tuning in today, if you haven't tried Ocho yet, you've been missing out for about 10 years now on some true hidden gems on the shelves in the tequila aisle. So hopefully we get to talk to you soon about the future pigeon or rabbit project to be determined, I suppose. But anyway, so Carlos, thanks a lot, man. We really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure talking. And Jesse, same to you. And everybody else, thanks for tuning in tonight.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Pat, what's up next?
I think we don't have anything until the weekend of Memorial Day. We've got the Hotel Tango guys coming in on Wednesday. I think it's the 26th. So that'll be back to Whiskey Wednesday, away from tequila. And then, yeah, yeah, we do. It's tequila season. We need more tequila. All right, Carlos,
Exactly.
we're going to book you every Wednesday for the summer.
Every Wednesday.
Thank you.
All right.
thanks, guys.
Cheers, guys.
Everybody, we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Jesse.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.